All right, welcome to the Apex Vaulting Podcast. This is going to be an awesome episode. This is episode 114. And as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, or you can watch us on YouTube. Our channel is just Apex Vaulting. Also, if you enjoy the episode, please share it with a friend. Also, if you enjoy our content, you can follow us on Instagram at The Real Apex Vaulting, and we're Apex Vaulting on Facebook and
All right, now I'm ready.
Today, we have an awesome guest for you. Obviously, the last few weeks have been very exciting in the pole vault community. We've had the World Championships in the past couple of weeks and some amazing results. And today, we have an awesome guest who can give us some perspective on that. Chris Chappell, why don't you tell the audience who you are, a quick rundown, and then we can get talking about the World Championships.
Sure. So I'm Chris Chappell. I work with UCS Spirit. My family's been in the pole business since my grandfather started working with Herb Jenks, the inventor of the fiberglass pole, in 1970 something, early 1970s. So that's it.
Wow. Yeah, that's it. That's it. You make it sound so simple. Well, I mean, look, that's a huge span of time. And I mean, you guys have provided the poles for so many amazing athletes. I mean, I guess I'll start here is like, obviously Mondo jumps on UCS Spirit. He, had an amazing performance. And there's a lot of things that I wanted to bring up, but I think it's kind of cool. I mean, like from Mondo, then it's like Renault who broke the world record, and prior to Renault, Bupka, all in UCS Spirit. And, I think all of them have similarities and differences. What's your perspective as the family that's providing the equipment to these athletes? What's your viewpoint? How do you look at those three athletes and the things that they've accomplished? What are your viewpoints?
Well, as a bit of company history, even before Spirit, Bupka was jumping on a Pacer 3 pole, which was the pole that my grandfather really became most involved with. He began working with Herb when they were making the Catapult, which was the second iteration of the fiberglass vaulting pole. So before that, it was the Sky pole, and then he sold that business and got involved with Browning Arms Company, and he was making the Browning's Catapult in the early, actually, I guess it was the late 60s. And then together they created Pacer and the Pacer 3, and that's the pole that Sergey set his first world records on.
Okay.
And before that, it was Bob Seagren was using the Catapult, and a lot of people probably remember the Munich Olympics where the poles were banned.
Yes.
And that was a green Catapult that Herb and my grandfather were making and distributing. And it's kind of a whole nother interesting and wild story in and of itself. But my family's been involved with world record setters ever since the beginning, which is really it's a really neat thing to be a part of, and it's kind of surreal, I guess, for me, because it's sort of part of my family's legacy. Just being on the pole business and manufacturing pole vaulting poles, and we've been really fortunate to forge coaches and athletes, and I think people trust us, and they trust that when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. And that's a big part of our kind of mission and part of our business strategy, I guess. I mean, we don't really sit down and have strategic mission meetings, but, we always say, look, if we can get you the poles you need, we're going to do it. And that's probably one of the biggest things about my family and us is, like, even as an example, we made 70 poles for the championships, for the World Championships this year.
Yeah.
And getting the poles to the various countries and training camps and all that. We delivered about 20 to San Diego, where a couple of teams were training, some to Seattle where they were training. And then I drove on my car, probably 40 poles up to Eugene, and was driving all around. You know, there was training camps in Corvallis and some out like in some of the small high schools outside of Eugene. There was about probably 7 athletes or so that jumped on poles that World Championships.
Yeah. Well, I think something that really sticks out.
But, you know,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to answer your question about, you know, Mondo and Renault and Sergey, they were all very different athletes. They all have different strengths, I would say. But they also do a lot of things similarly as well, on the pole and on the runway, to, you know, maximize the use out of the vaulting pole.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, different athletes. I mean, I remember one time walking past Renault, and, you know, I'm not a big guy, but I was like just shocked at how, you know, normal looking Renault is. You know what I mean? Like if you walk by him on the street, you would not imagine like, you know, world record holder. And it's amazing what some of these athletes can do with different bodies, but it's like they get on that runway, they're generating that speed. One of the things that stuck out to me as you were talking is like that idea of trust. You know, I think even, you know, us running a pole vaulting club and coaching athletes, I think always our athletes trust that we're going to be there when we need to be there. We're going to provide a great service. And I think the same, you know, for you guys, I mean, there's got to be an immense amount of trust. I mean, one of the things that, you know, you told me was the pole that Mondo used, that's the first time he used it, was at the meet for that world record. And it's like, you have to have a great amount of trust that, hey, this is produced properly, and this will be exactly the pole that I need. I think sometimes I know I take it for granted. I know that when we're using the UCS poles, you know, and I don't want to make this sound like a commercial for UCS, but it's like, I take it for granted. I know when we're going up 5 pounds or we're going up 10 pounds or, you know, whatever different length, I know what's going to happen. There's not even a thought in my mind that like, oh, maybe this won't be the right fit. You know, can you maybe speak to that, you know, building that trust in your athletes and coaches that you work with, you know, and how you guys accomplish that?
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it comes down to, you know, trust is something that you earn. You know, you don't just people just don't blindly trust somebody. And then, and the other part about that is that it's continuing, right? So if we mess up, someone that would trust us before, maybe they might think twice the next time. And so ever since the beginning, we've always taken the approach that if we're going to build a product that somebody relies on, which I think a vaulting pole is a unique product to produce, because it's you have to have a lot of trust in not just in the consistency of it, but in the fact that it's not going to break. I mean, let's face it. I mean, there is a potential for danger and risk in the pole vault.
Right.
And so we say it a lot, you know, we can afford to break a pole in the cage in the factory as opposed to it breaking out on the field. So what that means is throughout the process of manufacturing the pole, we're constantly looking for any kind of a defect, a blemish or a bubble or anything that doesn't look right. So there's cosmetic and then there's structural. And if it doesn't look right, it gets shelved. It goes in a reject pile, and that's that. And it's for that reason that, you know, we want to produce a very high quality product that people can believe in. And then it comes down all the way down to like the flex number being, you know, a millimeter different. You know, let's say we're trying to hit a 22.2 that one of your kids needs, and we hit a 22.3. Not a big difference, but it's not a 22.2. So the 22.2 goes in the rack and we take another try at the 22.3.
Right.
And I think doing that for 35 years develops and builds that trust and belief that when we say it's a 22.3, that's what it is. It's not, there's no margin. We don't really give a big margin for error.
Right.
And so I think just continuing that and doing that constantly, it hopefully develops and earns trust over generations. You know, we have people now that we sold poles to their parents and now they're buying poles, you know, and that's kind of Mondo's situation. You know, way back when Greg was jumping, he was jumping on Spirit poles. And so when Mondo and really all the Duplantis kids showed an interest in pole vault, it was natural, you know, and obviously Mondo's the youngest boy out of the three brothers. And then he has a younger sister, but you know, when he was showing interest and promise in pole vault, came a point where, you know, he wasn't big enough to jump on the smallest pole we made. So Greg asked if it was possible to make a smaller pole, and we did. And ever since then, we've, you know, developed a really strong relationship with the Duplantis family over many, many years. And it really started with a phone call from Greg's dad to my dad, saying, you know, hey, pretty good high school kid. And turns out he's one of the best high school kids ever to pole vault, you know, but that's a 3-generation family that we've really been fortunate enough to call our friends.
Yeah. No, that is very fortunate. But I think also, like, you know, we've been talking about, you know, establishing that trust and, you know, delivering what you promise is super, super important. Kind of to go back to specifically the World Championships, what were your feelings or like, did you have a feeling he might break the world record? Like, what were your thoughts going into the meet before it even started?
Well, I have a couple of stories actually. Sure. So early in the year, he jumped at pre.
Okay.
And I brought 2 poles with me for the pre-meet that kind of fit sort of in the middle of the series. And so I brought the poles up and the conditions weren't that great at pre. And actually they moved the meet. So they were going to jump on Saturday. And actually it was really cool. They did a cool thing where they sold a pole vault only, not a pole vault only, but a special pole vault ticket.
Okay. And
with the ticket, you would have an opportunity to do they did a question and answer thing on, I think it was Thursday night.
Oh, awesome.
And then they were going to have a practice session on Friday that gave all these ticket holders access to the practice session. And we brought up a couple extra poles, like Mondo sized poles that are sort of, you know, they were poles that had, you know, blemishes that we couldn't put on the market, but they're, you know, 520s and pretty close to the same flex, you know.
And,
so, you know, give the fans a chance to pick up the pole and be like, you know, see what it's all about. And then have some really cool interaction with the athletes. Unfortunately, the forecast was like 100% rain for Saturday, which is when they were going to jump. So they moved the comp to Friday. And it was pretty overcast and still not very great weather, a little bit cold. But Mondo jumped, I can't remember the height progression exactly, but it was 90 something. And then they went to 6 meters, maybe 6.0 something. And he was looking really good. But he just wasn't quite rolling the pole over. And I talked to him after the meet. And he said the same thing. You know, it's like sometimes when it's a little bit cold like that, I feel like I just have one little element of movement at takeoff that moves the pole a little bit better when it's just a little bit warmer out. So, you know, I'm thinking about this in the back of my mind at World Champs, because now all of a sudden it's like 30 degrees warmer than it was at pre. It's later in the season. He really hasn't had great conditions all year. But anytime Mondo jumps, there's a good chance he's going to jump 6 meters or more. He's just He's just that good. So seeing the conditions, I thought he could jump really high today. But world record it's way up there. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. Well, I thought, what I thought was interesting too, was I remember, listening to the broadcast and stuff like that. He had the one miss at 80, I think the 580 bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, I don't know. I mean, I watch pole vault all day. So I was like, I could tell that he just like almost like probably like 70, 80 feet from the box. He could tell he was like, oh, this is really tight, and he tried to get his feet down, but it was tight. And so he missed it. And I'm just like, it's so funny because like the announcers are trying to make it sound like, oh no, like what's going to happen? And I'm like, going back to like consistency, I think when there's a coach and athlete that are consistent, that's not a problem. Like they knew, they just, all right, adjust the step and he's going to bomb it on the next one, which is what happened.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
Body language says a lot too. Like whenever I'm at a meet, especially, I really enjoy being at the meet because you can see what happens in between jumps and how guys are walking or talk, There's body language says everything.
Right.
And you kind of saw, at least I did, I saw him get out of the pit and it was just like kind of annoyed,
Right.
Whereas like some people you see on a first attempt miss, they kind of carry some extra stress. Again, then it turns ugly because he's only got one shot. You can tighten up. There's a lot of things, but I'll say that's one thing about a veteran vaulter. And actually Kevin Mayer, the decathlete, he had a similar situation where he missed his first two jumps at his opening bar.
Oh, wow.
And I was sitting with some guys and I'm like, oh man, what do you do? Right. Cause he kind of had like an okay first attempt. And then his second attempt was big, but he came down on it.
Right.
And I'm like, do you make an adjustment? Do you move the standards? Do you lower the grip? Do you do anything different? And both the guys sitting next to me were like, you keep everything the same. And one guy, he's from the Netherlands. You might remember his name is Christian Taminga.
Okay. Doesn't ring a bell.
He has a couple other guys in his group, but he goes, you might even move the standards back. And I'm like, what? And he's like, well, yeah, because, his third attempt, he might run a little bit more aggressively. And I don't know what they did, if they did any adjustments, but he almost missed the bar on the way up.
Yeah.
He kind of like just almost hit it, but they had moved the standards back 5 centimeters.
Wow.
That's when, and I think I heard, I can't remember who said it, but it only takes one chance to make the bar. Right. And it does matter, because of misses and how that plays out later on in the comp. But if you're down to a third attempt, you can't count yourself out because you still have a jump, but you can't let that stress affect too much of what you're going to do.
Right.
But back to Mondo, you could just see it was like, whatever, no big deal.
Right. Yeah.
But then if you watch his jumps in prelims, it was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of video of Bubka jumping 575, 570, 580, just by loads.
Right.
And then, personally, watching Renault jump it in Reno at the summit, it was quite a few years ago, and I think it was it was the year after he had broken the world record.
Okay.
And you just kind of were like, just so much height on 570. And then Mondo just multiplies that by 10. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
But really after the prelim, I thought,
yeah. So that, just to go back to the polls, just because I know some people would be curious. So what pole was he on when he broke the world record?
It was a 520 11.7.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, for everybody who maybe doesn't know metric, so that's like a 17-foot pole. And like, if we were talking about pounds, what would you say that was in pounds? Like a weight label is on there.
Yeah, I think we call it a 215
Okay.
pound.
Okay.
And
So,
then I want to say the next kind of pole 220 would probably be at like around 11.5 maybe. So
okay.
it's not, you know, it's, yeah.
And
then
we were,
I mean,
go ahead.
after that, we reach a certain stiffness, and the poundage kind of is, it's not irrelevant, but it's just less important,
right.
I suppose. But like, for
Right. 'Cause
example,
I think at that level,
we
like
don't rate
those
any
people
polls
aren't, who's
above
ordering that besides,
225.
right. So like, and who's ordering stuff after that anyway? You're only dealing with, I mean, how many people actually order something that stiff at any length?
I kind of missed that. Sorry.
Oh, I get why you're saying like you don't really put weight labels on it and stuff, because like what percentage of people are actually buying poles that stiff, would you say?
Yeah. So, well, there's length and stiffness, right?
Right, right, right.
You know, it's much more common that we have an athlete or a coach wanting to get a pole that's like a 14-foot, 200, 205, 210.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for a kid that's they're probably going to be a decathlete, but you know, they're still trying to figure some things out, and so they're not able to hold so high.
Right.
So in a situation like that, it's more important or more pertinent that there's a weight rating on the pole. Whereas by the time athletes are jumping on 520s, even maybe 5 meters,
right,
you know, there's a certain skill level where they're, you know, they don't need a full 5-pound stiffness of pole. You know, their jump is so consistent that, you know, for Mondo as an example, I think he's at like 0.3 stiffness difference in his series of poles. So he might have.
And for people listening, if you're saying 0.3, what would that be in pounds, just to give people an idea to understand, right? So 5 pounds would be how much of a jump in stiffness?
Well, so that's also complicated because it depends on the stiffness and the length. So, and so I guess we should go back a few steps and discuss how we measure the stiffness of a pole. So when we make a pole, we need to know kind of the context of where that fits. And so based on the length and the stiffness, we can know what the pound weight rating should be.
Okay.
And that's determinant on how stiff the pole is and how long the pole is. And so we'll measure the pole in the middle of the pole, and the pole is resting on each end. And then based on the depression of that pole, we know what the stiffness is. And that stiffness is measured in a centimeter or millimeter grade. So for example, Mondo's on a 11.7, that's 11 centimeters, 7 millimeters. In say like a 14-foot series, the weight range, there would be maybe one point, something like that, to make a 10-pound or a 5-pound weight rating. Okay. So you could have 10 poles that are progressively stiffer that all fit within that weight rating.
Right.
So
yeah,
then,
that makes sense.
Yeah. And so we, of course, we adjust the scale for the length of the pole. And so, you know, like a weight rating or a stiffness rating, flex number in a 14-foot pole isn't going to be the same as a flex rating in the 15-foot pole, because they're two different lengths. So they're measured on we have to accommodate for that length.
Right.
So when you're talking about what does a flex number mean in 1 pounds to another, it gets a little bit complicated, because as the pole gets stiffer, you know, 1 millimeter of stiffness means more than if it's just, I mean, if you just 0.0,
Right.
to 0.3 would be 10% of 30. And then if you go 10, 0.1 would be 10%. Sorry, I said 30%, but I meant 10%.
Yeah.
So as the pole gets stiffer, that 0.0 stiffness means different things. So I can't make a blanket statement to say that, 1.0 is 10 pounds. It just doesn't quite work that way.
Right.
But what I can say is that, as an athlete is developing, their step might vary a foot, 2 feet.
Right.
And when they take a jump, they might be able to say that they felt a difference. They might not.
Right.
But a girl at the very most elite level, their step might change 1 inch and they're going to know the difference.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it comes down to consistency in the run and the takeoff and the vault to where the progression of pole should be. So if they're duplicating the same jump over and over and over again, and their step is very consistent, their takeoff is very consistent, then, maybe taking a 5-pound difference of stiffness in pole might be too big of a jump. Whereas a kid that is going to grow 6 inches over the course of the year,
right.
A high school kid developing, going that tight of a progression, they're going to jump on a different pole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it makes it really difficult to sort of duplicate and learn or how to progress in that way.
Right. And that's why too, and we were kind of talking about this prior to the podcast. I think when you're coaching athletes and you're developing athletes, like you said, you don't need such incremental adjustments with the pole. It doesn't need to even be maybe sometimes 5 pounds apart. You can make those 10-pound jumps with beginners because, like you said, they're advancing so quickly. The other thing for anybody who's listening, in my opinion, as a coach, I think when you have those people that are in the beginner stages or novice stages, you don't want to over adjust. I think everybody wants to over adjust the step, over adjust the grip, over adjust the pole, over adjust the standards. No, let the athlete develop their consistency in their jump, in their run, and their plant, their takeoff, so that then, eventually, then you will have to do a 5-pound jump. And then maybe they get to a certain level, like you're saying right now, where you don't even want to do a 5-pound jump. You might have to do less, but that should be a way more refined athlete. Like you said, I mean, if you can feel a 1-inch difference in your run, that definitely tells you that you're dealing with someone who's a skilled athlete. So quick aside. So I had mentioned to one of my high school boys, what pole Mondo was on, the 17-215. And he was wondering if the best approach to get to that pole as an athlete is you get the equivalency in every foot. So start with a 13-295 and work your way up. I mean, what do you think about that?
Hey, I don't know. I mean, that's a interesting idea, I suppose. I don't know if I've never heard anybody doing that, but I'd like to see how that plays out.
Oh, could you even imagine what would a 295 be in flex, you think? 13?
Probably need to put a pole inside a pole. We had a guy come and he was in the shop, and he's a bigger dude, and he doesn't know anything about pole vault. He's like a materials guy. So anyway, he's like, I'm probably around, 250 or something, so we're like pulling poles out of the rack. I'm like, I don't know, this might work for you. But then I'm like, hey, we'll just put one of these small poles inside the bigger pole and it won't bend at all.
Oh man. Yeah. I don't know.
There is in like physics, stiff and so short.
I'm sorry, you cut off there a little bit. Say that again. I'm sorry, you cut off.
Oh, I was just saying, I think there's a certain point where like it can be so short and so stiff. It's like you could have a pole that's like so short and so stiff that it's just the physics they don't quite work, right? Like where it just doesn't quite. It's not gonna bend. So you're better off. Yeah. So at that point, you might as well just stiff pole, and that really, I mean, that's essentially a big part of Petrov model is, you know, a lot of straight pull and learning how to move the lever without it bending at all. And then maybe bending a little bit and then a little bit more and so on and so forth. But in some of his athletes gripping really, really high, like probably 15, 16, 16 is probably a little high, but maybe like 14, 6, 15 feet on a pole that just barely bends a little bit. Yeah. So that could be, you know, your guy's idea. It could be, you know, it's basically that.
Yeah.
Well, until they get to a point where they can grip high enough that it does start to bend.
Right. Well, so since you bring up Petrov, I thought that was something that stuck out to me watching the meet, where I'm like, wow, here's Petrov again. You know, he's coaching the 3rd and 4th place guys, you know, and obviously you guys have been involved with Petrov over the years. I mean, what do you say about that guy as a coach? In my opinion, you know, again, people talk about Bill Belichick in the NFL with the Patriots. I mean, I think Petrov, I mean, he just consistently keeps producing. You know, what is it about that guy?
I don't know. I mean, I can say from like personal experience, his level of acceptance is really, really high. Right. So he demands a lot from the athletes. And I think it drives them to produce more. So as an example is EJ looked fantastic. I mean, he jumped so well, but it's the first time the Philippines have ever medaled in track and field ever in a major World Championships, Olympics, anything like that. So to do that is a big accomplishment for a kid from the Philippines. But the body language was of disappointment a little bit. And I think it's because I think they both know that, well, number one, I mean, he ran through 3 times at 6 meters. So that's always a little bit like, oh, you know, that's disappointing. And I don't know what the story is on that, but I think both EJ and Petrov felt like today could have been his day to jump 6 meters. And he could have. I mean, if he had the same exact jump at 90, was it 94? Yeah. If he had that at 6 meters, that's a good chance that's a make. Right. And then he's second, not third. You know, there's a lot of factors there. And of course, Nielsen is so solid. He could jump 6 meters on any given day, it seems like. So to say, you know, he could have been second if this happened. Well, of course, but it didn't. And no, but he's jumping great. And I just think that in their view, they know there's more. You know, even though he competed really well and he jumped really well and took home some hardware, was, you know, massive for him and his country. Yeah. So I think there's that side of it. You know, he's pretty relentless when it comes to technique. And like, if you're not doing it, we do it again until you do it. And then once you do it, we're going to repeat it. We're going to repeat it. We're going to repeat it. So I think there's that element. And I just think he spends a lot of time developing the run and the takeoff. And all the guys that he's coached have that very similar approach where the run is really building from the start and accelerating on. Yes. Yeah. You know, and he's been at it a long time. I mean, I talked to him over the week, you know, and I think he said he's like 72 years old, maybe a little bit more. So he's like, I don't know how much longer I can keep coaching, but he also, you know, his deal is always a long-term projection. So EJ, I think, is in year 6, maybe working him. Oh, wow. Tiago's been jumping with him since he was like 16. I mean, he jumped a lot with Elson, but Elson brought him to Petrov in the beginning and they worked a lot together. So his development over time has been really tied to Italy. Obviously Elson did a really great job and coached him from the time he was young, but he sought out that sort of, you know, Petrov model, so to speak. But I don't know. He's had some great vaulters of different body types and different backgrounds.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing to watch. And I mean, again, like for anybody who's listening, the takeaways that, I would get from thinking about like so far, everything that we talked about is like, one, like that consistency, the meticulousness. And I don't know if you're familiar. I've been listening to some Tim Grover stuff. Do you know who Tim Grover is?
No.
You definitely know his clients. He trained Michael Jordan. He also trained Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
I mean, he's like another one of these guys that talk about like, being meticulous and driven and not being satisfied. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, like, I mean, anybody else, if they walked into World Championships and placed third and had the day EJ had, would be all smiles. But when you're that driven, it's like, there was more there, That's something that, I mean, I think is critical for a winning attitude,
I remember Sergey, same kind of attitude. I remember him saying in an interview one time, he said, someone asked him, like what motivates you or whatever. And he said, well, I am still Sergey. I broke the world record, but tomorrow I'm this, if we can go higher. Yeah. And that was, I think, just a certain mentality. And I think Mondo's the same way. I mean, shoot, he broke every age group world record since the time he was, I don't even know, 5, 8, and then, but he's a special case because he just is. But how do you jump? I mean, he beat the field by 20 centimeters, 27 centimeters. It's crazy to think about. 10 inches. Like I can't wrap my head around that. But, I know he's thinking about 622, 623, 630, maybe, what's possible.
Yeah. No. And I mean, I definitely think too, the thing that I really enjoy and love about Mondo is his level of competitiveness. I think sometimes, in the pole vault community, especially, it sometimes seems like just a bunch of people jumping together and having a good time, but it's like, he looks so driven. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but even during COVID, when they did that like garden vault in the backyard, it's like, he didn't want to end in a tie. He's like, no. Like, I got to keep going. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to win this thing. And this is just like a silly backyard, like, let's have fun thing. And he's competitive there. And I just think that's some next level stuff, I
remember seeing you being all mad about them ending it in a tie. You're like, this is BS.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I give them props for coming up with a solution, and coming up with this competitive environment. But, and you're right. It's like sometimes in the pole vault community, it's cool because it is a brethren. We're all kind of trying to do the same thing. We're fighting the same physics. And so it becomes kind of a personal mission of jumping your personal best. Can you improve yourself?
Right.
But there is a competitive nature about it. And there is a competitive element about competing against your peers. Mm-hmm. And some people are just fiercely competitive. And I think he has that thing. And it doesn't mean that he can't be friends with his competitors. It just means that on the track, he wants to be better than them.
Right. No, 100%. And I think that's something too that I definitely think people struggle with, because like I'm also very big on like honesty. Like I think honesty is super, super important for me. And and I think sometimes people try to be overly friendly. Like I even like talking to like high school coaches and being at high school meets and stuff like that. It's like, oh, we're all friends. Like, yeah, you look pretty pissed when you lost though. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I think there's that level of like, you can be competitive and want to win. I think that's fine. That's honest. And then after the meet, we can still shake hands. We can still grab food together, and that's okay too. I just to me, it's like, you gotta be honest about wanting to win,
Yeah. I mean, I'm competitive too, just like everybody. And obviously we want to see people progress. We want to see the pole vault progress and be a positive influence in people's lives and all of those things. But I do like to see people who are choosing to use our poles perform. It gives us great joy to see somebody using a spirit pole and perform, and it's like you get so-and-so be using spirit, and I do deeply believe that our poles provide the best chance for athletes to jump as high as possible. I think the way that we build the poles speaks to that. And I think that the consistency that we provide from pole to pole speaks to that. And hopefully we can help develop that trust in athletes. But I think, everyone pole vaulting can benefit from a spirit vaulting pole over all other poles.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And, to kind of segue on a final topic I'd love to discuss with you is I agree with the spirit poles. I mean, we use them. There's a wall of them behind me right now. And one of the things that and this is, again, being really honest, one of the things that I love about running a pole vaulting club, and we were kind of talking about this before the podcast, is this is a great sport. This sport can provide so much for people. And like we were talking about, like at my club, we actually have a lot of like children and parents that jump at the club. And this is their way of getting physically fit, and I think pole vault is one of these great sports that, one, it's fun. And you shared a story about Becky Holiday, who, I remember she's a great vaulter. Maybe you can share that with us, but it's like, it's a great way to stay in shape. It's fun. And the thing is, unlike some physical activities, like I brought up like powerlifting. I happen to be wearing a powerlifting shirt, but like you could be very unhealthy and powerlift and deadlift a very big weight. But in pole vault, it kind of like, it doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room. Like you got to be strong, you got to be fast, but you can't be too heavy, you can't be too light. It's like you kind of hit that sweet spot where, it keeps you in check. And it also, because it is such a fun activity, I feel like it's the carrot that motivates you to maybe do some workouts that you wouldn't normally want to do. Do you want to maybe speak to that and share that Becky story?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I didn't hear quite all of it. It broke out a little bit, but I was at the Nike Nationals in Eugene a couple of weeks before Worlds, and I ran into Becky, and, she's talking about pole vaulting again, and she was obviously a stud.
What was Becky's lifetime best? I'm sorry. What was Becky's lifetime best? It was over, I think it was 15 at least, something like that.
I was going to say at a very minimum, it was high 14s, maybe 15. I bet it was like 15.3, I want to say.
Yeah. Okay.
But she was an Olympian, and I'm pretty sure she competed a couple World Championships, if not, won. Mm-hmm. She's coaching a little bit now, but she's like, I pole vault for fun and for fitness, basically. Mm-hmm. And I was like, pole vaulting beats, hammering it out on your Peloton at home on the stationary bike, staring at a wall, it's a really fun activity. And the other thing about pole vault that we didn't really talk too much about is it's pretty unforgiving. Right. Or it can be, right? Yeah, so like, especially when you're learning mm-hmm. on a straight pole, mm-hmm. and you have a bad takeoff, it's like, it kind of can hurt a little bit, Sure. You don't really move the pole and things like that. So I can totally see, especially somebody who's never vaulted before and they pick it up at a later age and mm-hmm. they start to kind of start to figure some things out. It starts to get more and more fun, and you jump a little bit higher. And then you have this very, very measurable level of success, so to speak, did I improve? Right. It was funny at the World Champs. I had seats like in the way upper deck, which mm-hmm. aren't terrible. Actually, I enjoy watching the vault from far away sometimes, mm-hmm. but I got there pretty early, and the whole stadium was more or less empty except for the coaches. And so there was a few people I wanted to see and talk to and stuff. So I ended up sitting down, just like kind of down low. Mm-hmm. And kind of seat hopping, people would be like, "Oh, that's my seat," and move. Yeah. But I ended up sitting down in like the front row for a little bit, and I sat next to a girl that was a photographer. She's from New Zealand. Okay. And she actually has some really great pole vault shots. Mm-hmm. And I had we actually purchased some for like catalog use and stuff.
Okay.
And so I had known her through email only,
Okay.
you know, and I didn't never met her or anything. And so we were talking and she's like, oh, you know, are you a coach? And I'm like, no, but you know, we make the poles. And she's like, oh, and I was wearing a UCS Spirit hat and a shirt.
Yeah.
And she looks at it and she goes, oh, wait, are you Chris? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, oh, Alicia, you know, and so we like shook hands. Turns out she started pole vaulting when she was like 21 years old or something.
Wow. Awesome.
And she was a runner and she
Mhm.
became friends with the pole vault group. And I think for like photography, pole vault is pretty fun to take pictures of because of the, you know, like I remember in high school taking a photography class and the person that they were talking about, like at the pinnacle where the athlete's going over the bar, you know, it's like a good,
right. Yeah. Great shot.
Photography lesson, action shot, you know. And anyway, so she's like, yeah, I just thought it would be fun. And she's totally hooked, you know, she just loves it, loves pole vault. And I think that's anyone that tries it. That's why the pole vault community is kind of so tight knit and strong. It's like, we all recognize and respect the challenges that it presents, you know, whether it's people jumping on other poles or our poles. That's why I think it can be friendly, but also competitive because we understand the challenges, right? Like, you know, oh, how do you figure this part out? Or how do you figure that part out? You know?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I think it's an amazing, you know, sport. And like you said, like, I think people even picking it up at older ages, like in their 20s, 30s, heck, even 40s, it provides that like mental puzzle. Like you have to figure out so much technique to figure out. And then it's like, so you can get that satisfaction, like even before you clear your first bar, it's like, okay, I finally figured out how to turn today, or I finally figured out how to plant today. And then the physical elements are great because you are going to get in better and better shape. You know, maybe you were someone that didn't have the upper body strength. Now you're developing that. Maybe you didn't have the lower body strength to run fast. You're developing that. And there's all that kind of goes along with it. And it's a sport that can provide so much for the people that are trying it. And, you know, I definitely can see, you know, pole vault continuing to grow. You know, I think just people have to be maybe a little bit more open-minded. I think it's funny. I sometimes almost feel like at the top level, it's like, everything's kind of like, all right, everything's cool. But then on the bottom level, it's like people sometimes poo-poo, like maybe a 21-year-old only jumping 8 feet at a meet. And it's like, no, but this is a person starting out. Like, it's okay. They're just getting into the sport. This is another person to add to our community. And I think that's where people have to kind of open their minds and think about it from that perspective, you know? You know, someone clearing a bar for the first time is awesome.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of times I don't want to say it's a pole vault specific thing. I think it's global. I think it transcends a lot of different sort of communities and different things, but there can be an element of elitism, right? Like if you go to the ski slopes and you see somebody skiing on skis that are 30 years old or 40 years old or whatever, and you're like, oh, your equipment's old and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But why? I mean, they're out there having fun and doing something outside that's active and contributing to their own, you know, personal athleticism or their own you know, health. And why not? Why can't pole vault be something that's a workout? Like if you go out running and you run a marathon, you know, so you line up next to, you know, this elite level marathoners, like, are they going to be like, oh, you don't belong here, get out of here, you know, you're doing it all wrong? Like, why? I mean, unless someone's being just totally blatantly unsafe, doing things that are, you know, that you know that is a workout. I mean, how sore do you get after you pole vault if you haven't done it in a long time? Like, it's a lot. I took my daughter to one of those trampoline parks the other day.
Okay.
And like jumped on the trampoline for about 3 minutes and I'm like wrecked. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm in okay shape. I you know, do some running, do some biking, like but it's a different thing, you know? So why not? Why can't you go to the gym and rep out 25 vaults and just be gassed and got a little bit better that day? Like, you know, you don't have to be trying to set the 21-year-old record is going to be pretty tough to beat, but
yeah.
Masters world record, you know, you're 55
right.
years old, like you don't have to try and jump 16 feet.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Well, I mean, I feel like we definitely
the question is
topics.
how do we get
24-hour
fitness to put a pole vault pit in there? 20.
Well, you know, I mean, I think that's the thing too. I think, you know, pole vault people have to start thinking on those terms, right? Like I'm, you know, I can discuss with you off the podcast some things that I'm thinking about, but like, that if we could get it to the point where, like, think about it, 24-hour fitness, like you said, like they have a basketball court, right? I don't think, you know, if only 5% of the population played basketball, they wouldn't put a basketball court in the 24-hour fitness. It doesn't seem to make sense, right? You could put more, like you said, you could put more rowing machines or treadmills over there, you know, in that space. But if we could get our sport popular enough where, yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine if a 24-hour fitness or one of these other places start putting a pole vault pit in, because that's something that people definitely want to do when they do a workout. Then, you know, we've reached a definitely crazy high level, you know? I mean, look at all the UFC gyms that open up, you know what I mean? Like that's definitely grown, crazy. You know, you wouldn't have thought that 20 years ago, you know?
Yeah, no, it's been a really popular thing, but it's interesting, you know, like if I fly somewhere or whatever, you sit down next to somebody on a plane and they're like small talk. Oh, pole vault. Whoa. Like, I didn't know that was, you know, a thing. I didn't know you could make a business out of that, you know? But then they always say, you know, oh man, I tried it in high school, or I wish I could, you know, I never tried that. What's it like, you know? And if you could just say, hey, come give it a go, you know?
Well, so I give people this like analogy, you know, maybe this is something good to end on, but like I give people this analogy. Imagine a world where the chocolate chip cookie didn't exist, right? Everybody loves chocolate chip cookies, right? But imagine a world where that didn't exist and you made the first chocolate chip cookie. Your toughest job is not making the cookie. It's getting everybody to know how awesome this cookie is and getting them to try it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's the hard part.
Sure,
making the cookie is actually pretty easy, you know, and you know it's good, but now it's like, how do you spread the word about this? To the point where now, I mean, think about how many variations we have of the chocolate chip cookie. You know, you have soft chocolate chip cookies, you have hard ones, you have milk chocolate chip, semi-sweet, white chocolate, right? Like there's so many different variations of it, you know? We basically have, I think, the chocolate chip cookie of sport.
Maybe. But you know, what's funny is like back to the history of it.
Yeah.
And so the fiberglass pole was invented in 1948. That's the first time it was made. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people think it wasn't until the 60s.
Right. Okay.
And the difference was, well, there was a lot of resistance, you know, because it was a game changer.
Right.
And so especially at the very elite level, right? A lot of people didn't like it because it changed pole vault.
Right.
And especially if you jumped at a really, really high level, let's say you jumped 15 feet on a straight pole, which is pretty remarkable. I don't know a lot of people that could do that today. Right. But it took a lot of people to try it to get to like, hey, you know, try using this fiberglass pole instead of the steel or bamboo.
Right.
And a lot of people, once they tried it, it was kind of like, oh, this is different. You know, this is a whole new deal.
Right.
And then, but it took 20 years to really start to gain some momentum.
Right. No.
Maybe, you know, with pole vault, it's, you know, but at the same time, I don't think there's a lot of people I don't go down to our neighbors in the business park and say, hey guys, you should come try pole vault. Maybe I should.
Maybe you should. Yeah. You know, I mean, definitely it's something that I think now, you know, even at my club, I think at first, like training post-collegiate adults who I would say are not training for the Olympics or trying to go to, right? Just regular adults who this is their thing. It took a little bit to kind of get momentum to get those kind of people through the door. now that they're here, like, it was so funny. Like I had a new girl come in the other day, and she's going into 7th grade, and her mom comes in, who mom looks like she's in fantastic shape. And she tells me her and dad were both D1 gymnasts at Illinois. So, and mom's in phenomenal shape. And she comes in, and just so happens that same session that girl came in, I had one of my high school boys come in, and his dad, who jumps also. And I'm like, she's like, parents jump? I'm like, yeah, like we have parents that jump in here. We have lots of adults. And you can see in her eyes, she was like, like mom and daughter jump together. That sounds good. Like you can tell, like she's kind of thinking about it now, where it's like, how awesome is that? Because even in my mind, like I feel like a lot of pole vault coaches are always thinking about their next champion or their next state title or whatever. And for me, I'm like, this is even better than a state title, because now it's like I'm providing such a bonding experience for a family, right? It's like if mom and daughter jump together, or son and dad jump together, or whatever combo, it's like I'm providing a bonding experience, something they're both doing together. It's going to add value to their lives. Like, I mean, state titles are cool. Don't get me wrong. I want to win, but it's like, that is amazing to me. And you start to really build a community and culture at your club, you know?
Yeah. No doubt. That's cool. I haven't heard of a lot of this, but why not?
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think that's the thing, is that we get into that mindset of, you know, of course we're riding a high after Mondo sets the world record.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like, it blows my mind what he did.
Yes.
But, you know, he's 1 in a million.
Right. Well, and this is the thing,
and
right?
pole vault, and I think.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think too that pole vault for me. So if we didn't make pole vaulting poles, I would be doing something else, right? And so it just so happens that that's the path that I chose through college, and I'm very passionate about pole vault. It's what I love. But if I was doing something else, it's the lessons that I learned pole vaulting that carry me through decision making, teamwork. Things are lessons that I learned pole vaulting. Yeah. And then if you can add on top of it sort of this bonding thing, and I mentioned skiing because it's something that we do. We live right by Tahoe, and I'm teaching my kids how to ski, and it's something that I see as a long-term thing that we can do together as they grow.
Right.
And so it's like, you know, and they really enjoy it. It's one of those things that that they took to really young, and they really enjoy it. But, you know, why couldn't that be for another family or my own family too, you know, someday?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I even think about, you know, again, and I guess to finish this podcast up, is like, Mondo breaking the world record was amazing. It was an amazing thing to watch. And, you know, I'm sure even some people, if they could, they'd be like, well, I'd like to get a taste of that. I know I'm not going to, you know, that's the world record. Yeah. I'm not going to jump the world record. But if I can get a little taste of that, you know what I mean? Like, I think that would be huge. And I think, and like you said, the life lessons, the bonding that people can have, it's an awesome sport that can provide that. You know, is there anything else you'd like to add before I close off the podcast?
No, I think just on that topic, pole vaulting is very intimidating, you know, especially from the outside looking in. And so it's like, how do you know, how can we introduce more people to it? But you know, that was actually, I don't know if you saw it, but we started kind of introduced it at the Pole Vault Summit, this last summit.
Okay.
And it's a project that I've been working on for a while. But the whole purpose and idea was that when, you know, Susie comes to pole vault practice or pole vault club or whatever, and her little brother or little sister sees her doing it and wants to give it a try, you know, as a club owner, you know, the smallest pole is like a 10-foot pole or 10-8.
Right.
And sometimes it's just too much, especially if it's a little kid. And so I thought, you know, is there a way that we can make it less intimidating for kids to try, you know, and it's not meant to be a training pole. It's not meant to be a pole that bends a long way. It's just meant to be relatively lightweight, get maybe a little bit of a twinge, so it's less intimidating for a kid. And then, you know, I would expect kids to jump on those poles for a year or two and then be actually pole vaulting on pole vaulting poles if they enjoy it. And so the other element of it was to try to produce it in a way that we could really reduce the cost.
Right.
And I think we're pretty close. It's tough with just material costs, but you know, we don't hardly make any margin on it. So it's something that is strictly kind of like a learning tool. It's like, hey, how can we try to help introduce pole vault to more people? And I think if there's a certain barrier to entry, if we can reduce that intimidation factor, then maybe more people would try it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I think that's a great idea. I know I've seen stuff with DC Vault with their Flyaway Kids programs. I think that's awesome. They have that smaller set of mats that, like you said, it's less intimidating for a little kid, and they're getting kids off the ground. And I think that's awesome, you know? Well, Chris, thanks again.
Well, I think, you know, it's yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, sorry, I know people were listening. There's a little bit of these delays, but yeah. So thanks again for doing this. I just want to end the podcast. I know we spent a lot of time. Just for everybody that's watching, please share it, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, our YouTube channel is just Apex Vaulting. And if you have any comments or questions, please email me at apexvaulting@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everybody.